Welcome back, and thank you all for joining. Here's a question for you. Is the U.S. empire on the decline due to incompetence, incoherence, and self-destructive policies? Look, all empires run their course. The Greek, the Roman, the Ming, the Byzantine, the British, the Ottoman. They were all the powers of their time, but they ran their course and came to an end. But the end of the American empire is interesting and unique to me in that the U.S. is only 249 years old, and it's not been an empire for all of that time. And its demise seems to be a result of incompetence, incoherence, and self-destructive policies due to hubris, arrogance, and a failure to understand history. Why? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Well, again, thank you all so much for joining me today. Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historic context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at some of today's headlines. The Washington Post reports 60,000 Gazans have been killed. 18,500 were children. And again, this is the Washington Post. Israel says it tries to minimize civilian casualties. It says Hamas operates in civilian areas, a justification it has used, or maybe a rationale, to target homes, schools, hospitals, and tent encampments for the displaced. This while PBS reports Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says no one in Gaza is starving. Quote, there is no policy of starvation in Gaza, and there is no starvation in Gaza. We enable humanitarian aid throughout the duration of the war to enter Gaza. Otherwise, there would be no Gazans, end quote. And this while Global Hunger Monitor says worst case scenario of famine playing out in Gaza. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, the IPC, a global hunger monitor, said in an alert yesterday that the worst case scenario for famine is currently playing out in the Gaza Strip due to the U.S.-backed Israeli siege on the Palestinian territory. Reuters reports Trump sets new deadline of 10 to 12 days for Russia to act on Ukraine. Trump set a new deadline on Monday of 10 to 12 days for Russia to make progress towards ending the war in Ukraine or face consequences. Underscoring frustration with Russian President Putin over the 3.5-year-old conflict, which, by the way, the U.S. started with Ukraine as its proxy. Trump has threatened sanctions on both Russia and buyers of its exports unless progress is made. The fresh deadline suggests that the U.S. president is prepared to move forward on those threats after previous hesitation to do so. And finally, U.S.-China trade talks conclude without a deal to prevent tariffs from surging again. Chinese and American trade negotiators concluded their two-day meeting in Stockholm without a resolution to avert tariffs from skyrocketing back to ultra-high levels that formed an effective blockade on trade between the world's two largest economies. Without an agreement, the U.S. and China are set to once again place historic tariffs on each other's imports starting the 12th of October. Do you get the sense or impression that no one is really listening to or at least feels threatened by the bluster and bravado of Donald Trump? Folks, since we opened the show talking about empire, as Hans Christian Andersen told us, The emperor has no clothes. On today's episode, the issue before us is mounting evidence shows that widespread starvation, malnutrition, and disease are driving a rise in hunger-related deaths. Latest data indicates that famine thresholds have been reached for food consumption in most of the Gaza Strip and for acute malnutrition in Gaza City. That's according to the IPC. My guest is an independent journalist, political and cultural analyst who publishes on Substack. He is the polemicist, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. As always, Jim, welcome back.
Thank you, Wilmer. Always a pleasure to be here.
Jim, I know you want to discuss Gaza, but come on, Jim. As Netanyahu has told us, don't believe your lying eyes. There's nothing to see here. There is no starvation in Gaza. But even as Trump has said, of all people, quote, we have to get the kids fed. He said this after seeing images of Palestinians on TV. He said, those children look very hungry. You think so? He later added that the scenes were real starvation and that you can't fake that. And even Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on Monday used the G word, genocide. She's the first Republican member of Congress to use the word genocide to describe the Israeli assault on the Palestinian territory. Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, your thoughts?
Yeah, credit to her. She's been very good on this. Look, this idea that there's no real hunger, there's no real starvation. This is not a policy of the Israeli. We are not going out to starve anybody. This is a pack of lies. It's a pack of crap. I wrote an article in April before the starvation became the crisis that it is, that nobody can, with any intellectual honesty, deny that Israel is carrying out a deliberate campaign to exterminate and expel the Palestinians. Now we have, it's not a deliberate policy of Israel. You have American doctors on television, in interviews saying, I tried to bring infant formula in my personal luggage because I know they need infant formula. And the Israelis seized the infant formula. That's not a mistake. That's a policy. Whom does it hurt to steal the infant formula except infants? Okay, so the Israelis have no legitimate claim not to. This is a deliberate, methodical extermination policy, and it's aimed at the women and children of Gaza, because that's the new generation. They've already damaged an entire. Even if all the food comes in today, there are hundreds of thousands of kids who will never be normal because of this physically. And this is a horror show to what it is like watching a movie. As I said, Israel has thrown us into a time machine back before, the decolonization movement, back before the civil rights movement, when Jim Crow was still accepted and lynching blacks was still accepted and apartheid South Africa was still accepted by the Western countries, and racism and colonialism were still accepted. And that's what Israel and the Zionist project is. It's an atavistic project that's absolutely a master race project, and for them the Palestinians are dispensable insects who have to get out of the way or be crushed. And that's the way it's always been since 48. And unfortunately, the United States has bought into that and has defined itself for the past 50 years at least as a Zionist country that's part of the Zionist enterprise, and that exists. One of its main missions is to guarantee and support the Zionist enterprise and make sure it succeeds, which means making sure those Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Just yesterday, they shot one of the guys from the film that won an Academy Award, was shot dead by an Israeli settler. And then the army came in, and the settler who shot dead the guy picked out 7 Palestinians to be arrested. So this is a disgrace. We're watching something that it's like being in Mississippi watching blacks be lynched. It's like being in Soweto watching blacks be killed by the South African regime. And I'm not supposed to be here. I should be someplace else. I should be in the 21st century, and unfortunately, this is just a horror show. And until I don't know what anybody's going to do about it. They're now, Britain, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state in September if you don't stop. Well, wait a minute. If it's a good thing to recognize a Palestinian state, do it now. A. B, that's over. The two-state solution is over. That's a way of trying to save Zionism, because at this point, everybody in the world knows that it's like saying we're going to have a two-state solution in South Africa. We'll leave the white supremacist regime and have all these have a Bantustan for the blacks. No. That's over. This is colonialism, that kind of racist, apartheid, white supremacist, Jewish supremacist regime, the world can't abide it. And you're seeing it. So I don't know what's going to come of this, but it's a horror to watch this. I've never been so daily angry and tears and anger and tears watching what's going on in Gaza, and watching that the world, it's only going to stop if it's defeated, if there's a military intervention with force to force the Israelis to get out of Gaza. And the West Bank too, it looks like now. So it's a very difficult situation. Donald Trump, the American polity is still, although it's changed a lot. I mean, what has changed over the past year is we do have now in the United States an explicitly and fully anti-Zionist movement, an awareness of that this is apartheid. This is Jewish white supremacism. It's a cousin of white supremacism. It's Jewish supremacism, no question about it. Master race. They're cockroaches. We got to kill them all because they just get out of the way. That's what it is. Everybody's realizing that now. And certainly the youth of America, including young Jews, turned against this. They don't want to have anything to do with it. So, but the elite is still, and certainly the current Trump administration is completely that. I mean, you have the Trump administration sanctioning one of the great heroines, Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, and they're sanctioning her, and they're denouncing Keir Starmer for even saying he might recognize Palestinian state. So the American political elite is still wrapped up in it, even though, hey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, they are coming around on this, because this does nothing for the United States. It really doesn't do. All it does is make us villains, make us rightfully perceived as villains in the world. And people hate us as they hate Israel, and they should, because any country that does what, as you said, we and Israel are doing, this is a joint. Israel has said none of this could happen without the complete daily support of the United States. We don't have any bombs, we don't have any bullets, we don't have the capacity to close borders unless the United States backs us on this. So this is our American crime too, and we've got to try and find some way to stop it. And I'm glad we keep talking about it, because until it stops, we have to keep talking about it.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago that the starvation is impacting an entire generation, which made me think, before we got to focus on starvation, the Israeli snipers were maiming an entire generation by shooting kids in their limbs. They were shooting them in the knee. They're shooting them in the hip. They're crippling an entire generation of children. And now they've gone from crippling an entire generation of children to starving an entire generation of children. You don't know what to say.
I know.
And you also mentioned the shift in the narrative, which is why I stressed at the top that article I was reading about what's going on was in the Washington Post. Because for the Washington Post, for the New York Times to start reporting what they're reporting demonstrates a tectonic shift in the landscape. We wouldn't have read this a year ago in the Post or in the Times.
Yeah.
Which also then I think demonstrates why the Zionist regime is escalating the attacks instead of trying to moderate or modulate this, because these are the last kicks of the dying mule, which will be proved to be the most dangerous.
Yeah, certainly to the Palestinians, they're dangerous because nobody is stopping what's happening to the Palestinians. Israel, I think, is undermining itself in the long run, maybe not so long run, but the Palestinians have a very short term on which to be saved. But yeah, look, as I said, this is a new anti-Zionist movement, and that's what they're trying to head off. They're going to try and blame this on the right-wing Israeli government, Netanyahu. They're going to try and revert to liberal Zionism and the two-state solution. The article in the New York Times, this is a genocide. The Washington Post that you cite, B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, came out yesterday, said this is a genocide. We have to face it. So these are things that are very difficult. And but these are really, this is for the benefit of the liberal Western audience. Okay. Mm-hmm. The Israelis don't care about this.
Right.
They don't care what anybody thinks. They know they're committing a genocide. They know they're racist. They know what they're doing, and they don't care. They'll try and they'll do what they have to do and say what they have to say to keep American support. The value of all this change is that we have to try and undermine American support. We have to have everybody from Marjorie Taylor Greene to, I won't even say the words AOC and Bernie because
please.
I mean, it's horrible, but you have to get everybody on board on this and really say this is doing nothing for the United States of America. It's a net detriment. Sorry. The Israelis sell themselves, and in a certain sense, they are an outpost of imperial America. That's true. But at the end of the day, on a practical basis, they are undermining American power in a way that's, America, they have friends in the Arab. The reactionary Arab monarchies, the Americans don't care about them. They could do very well, get all the oil they want out of the Middle East without Israel. This is something that undermines the United States. So we have to get every ally we can to stop this nonsense in Israel and to stop American support for Israel. Then Israel's over. Once American support is gone, Israel's over. And, you talk about this shooting and maiming. I wrote about this in 2018, the Great March of Return. Mm-hmm. I thought at that time, certainly now people are going to see what the problem is. They were deliberately crippling people. They were shooting. They had a contest to see how many kneecaps they could shoot out on a day. And they bragged, we know where every bullet goes. And they would shoot the medics. And then they shoot the reporters. And then they'd have contests how many knees they could take out. So they're crippling people. And now we have unbelievable, the largest number of child amputees in the world in Gaza. Just that statistic alone is just unbelievable. Without limbs cut off, without anesthetic, because they won't let the anesthetic in because maybe Hamas will steal it. This is unbelievable. So this, I thought in 2018, the American must see, Western liberals must see how bad, and it didn't happen. Like Norman Finkelstein said, I kind of given up that it would ever happen. The Israelis have done it for me. They have demonstrated in a way that cannot be denied in any kind of plausible way that they are racist. They treat these are untermenschen as far as they're concerned. They're going to kill them and expel them, and that's their mission. And they say it too loudly and too explicitly and too continuously. They repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So we have to stop American support for this. And everybody in the United States has to understand this. And they're going to try and, unfortunately for them, they're going to go back to the two-state solution, which really is over at this point. And the problem with the West, and this is for the Western liberals' sake, they're going to try and create another version of liberal Zionism that's acceptable and won't be so nasty to the Palestinians. It's not going to happen because the Israelis don't want it to happen. They don't want the impediment to a two-state solution is Israel and Zionism. They don't want it. So you're going to fight them about that. It's a waste of time. The South African regime didn't want a two-state solution, and the Israelis don't want a two-state solution. And so we have to. Zionism is an enemy of humanity, and we're watching it. And like South African apartheid and Nazi racism and fascism, the world has to say we can't stand this. And certainly in the immediate, somebody in the world has to say we are going into Gaza and we'll fight our way in necessarily to bring humanitarian aid. Look what happened to the Hamdallah, the latest freedom protest. This is, of course, when they arrested everybody. And guess who's got beat up on that? It was Christian Smalls. And the Israelis demonstrate their racism at every turn. So the only one who was beaten in that group was the black guy. So the Israelis are anti-black racists as well as anti-Palestinian. Right? Jewish supremacism is a cousin of white supremacism, and we see it. But anyway, this is a regime. This is a project. The Zionist project has to be rejected and defeated by the world.
So how, in terms of American politics, let's just focus on that point relative to American politics. When AOC says, oh, what's happening in Gaza is terrible, but she votes to send more weapons to Israel, how do we change the politics when Gregory Meeks, another member of Congress, stands before a podium and says Israel has a right to exist, and you have, of course, Hakeem Jeffries and the members of the Congressional Black Caucus that are supposed to be what the moniker for them was when it started, the conscience of the Congress. They are now unconscious.
Yep. Look, you can't be against Jim Crow and be in favor of Zionism. Those are contradictory things, okay? Jim Crow is Zionism against Arabs. Zionism is Jim Crow against Arabs. Sorry. And yeah, this is this Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself or to exist, as I wrote 2 years ago, because apartheid regime like this doesn't have a right to exist in the modern world. And Israel is an occupying power. It doesn't have the right to do that. And those who are occupied have the right. Black letter international law. They have the right to resist and to fight against occupation by any means necessary, including armed struggle. Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself against that. So AOC saying, "Oh, I'm just voting for defensive weapons." Even Marjorie Taylor Greene sees with that crap. You're not. I'm only going to send anti-aircraft weapons to Hitler. I mean, what are you talking about? That's the Iron Dome protects not only for civilian areas, even on the idea that Iron Dome protects military installations. So
that violates American law. It violates the Arms Export Control Act. It is illegal for the United States to send those types of weapons to the Zionist colony. That violates American law, but nobody wants to make that point.
Nobody. Look, Israel is a nuclear weapons state outside the NPT. That means in American law, the Glenn and Symington amendments, the United States cannot give any aid to the country. Every dollar in aid to the country that the United States gives is against the law. And in order to continue this, the president has to get up and lie every year to the American Congress. We don't know whether Israel has nuclear weapons or not. That's a lie. It's a conscious lie. They know it's a lie. Everybody knows Israel has nuclear weapons. It means the United States cannot legally give them military aid or any aid at all, I think. So this has been going on for 60 years by every American president, Democrat and Republican. And we have to. And it's happening. I mean, I welcome all these people on the right because America first. Hey, let's do it. I mean, this is the worst example, the very worst example of getting entangled in foreign adventures and foreign governments that we have no interest. American people have no interest in this. Is it paying your rent? Is it getting your kid an education? Is it getting your health care? Is it getting you a job? Has nothing to do with that. And it's just turning the world against us even more than it was. I have plenty of reason to be against us already, but now this is over the line. You cannot have this kind of slaughter of the innocents and expect that anybody's ever going to respect you again. And it really, it stops tomorrow, unless and until you take account of this and take accountability for it and take transparency for it and say, yes, we as a nation really were criminal. And this was really a crime that we regret. Nobody could ever trust you. You can't trust. It's not like if Hitler was defeated and we just left a kind of rump fascist regime in Germany and they didn't say anything about what they had done, that would be okay. No, it's not.
One more point on this, and then there are some other things that we can cover, and that is that you touched on this, but I want to unpack it just a little bit more. French President Emmanuel Macron announced last week that France will recognize Palestine as a state. And that is being heralded as a bold diplomatic move amid snowballing global anger over this starvation. Macron said that this is going to be formalized at the UN General Assembly in September. Quote, "The urgent thing today is that the war in Gaza stops and the civilian population is saved." This while British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says, quote, "I can confirm the UK will recognize the state of Palestine by the UN General Assembly in September unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution." Jim, that reminds me of Captain Spaulding in Animal Crackers. "Hello, I must be going. I cannot stay. I came to say, I must be going. I'm glad I came, but just the same, I must be going." La la. What in the hell is he saying?
Well, look, again, this is Western liberals begging the Israelis to let them save the two-state solution, because that's the best you're going to get, Israel. What they're saying is, please, and it makes no sense to say, oh, we are going to recognize Palestine in September unless the Israelis do X, Y, and Z. So if they do X, Y, and Z, then you're not going to recognize the Palestinian state, because either it's something that you're supposed to be doing, you should be doing, and you should have done a long time ago, or you're not doing it. But what you're telling Israel.
Why is that a threat?
Yeah.
And what is the threat supposed to accomplish? That just, especially after 80 years of this crap.
Yeah.
What? Keir Starmer, what?
I'm going to let you continue slaughtering and starving Palestinian children. I'm going to send our planes every day to get intelligence for you so you can bomb them. But 2 months from now, if you haven't changed anything, I'm going to then recognize the Palestinian state. And then what does that do for the Palestinians? Really? Does that change something for the Palestinians? So this is really an attempt to entice Israel. Look, I will reward you if you do something to get me off the hook with my constituents, because my constituents hate the fact that I'm supporting you. And therefore, I want you to stop doing this stuff so that I don't have to continue to take the heat for it. It's really Western liberals talking to themselves about this. The Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank don't care a bit about whether England or France or anybody recognizes a Palestinian state unless real serious material consequences, unless Zionism is defeated, they will never be secure, and they know it.
And well, 2 points on this, and then we'll move on to the other. One is Macron says he sent a letter to Mahmoud Abbas. You're working this through the one guy that represents nobody. I mean,
yep.
When you talk to the resistance, that's the last guy.
Yeah.
And so it I forgot this is so mine.
We'll recognize a Quisling, Abbas the Quisling. We'll recognize him as the Hamas. None of the Palestinian resistance groups could ever come to power, and we are going to decide who actually runs this supposed Palestinian state. They're positing a Bantustan, what they're doing, and saying that'll help us, because that's what we need for us, American and Western liberals, to have some credibility with our own, because it looks like we're doing something for the Palestinians. Then it's a load of crap, and the answer is the defeat and elimination of the Zionist project. But we have a ways to go with that, although we've gotten a lot further than I thought.
Jim, Harvard is now said to be open to spending up to $500 million to resolve this Trump dispute. The sum sought by the government is more than twice as much as the $200 million fine that Colombia said it would pay when it settled its clash with the House last week. And one of the things that hasn't gotten as much coverage as Harvard and Columbia is the University of Virginia's president, James Ryan, resigned after threats and open investigation by the government. And the Virginia University George Mason is now under investigation. And Jim, I don't think this has anything to do with anti-Semitism and the treatment of Jewish students. This is the cover for the attack on academia. Fascists hate independent academics. Fascists hate intellectuals, and they hate thought leaders. This takes me to Trump's infamous statement, "I love the uneducated." And a Random Jack says, when asked how fascism starts, Bertrand Russell once said, "First, they fascinate the fools, then they muzzle the intelligent." Jim Kavanaugh.
Yeah, this is a horrible surrender and capitulation of American Academy to fascist government takeover. I mean, really, look, they are however they try to hide it or, fiddle around with it. They are demanding control over what's taught, over what personnel are allowed to be hired and what they're allowed to say. And they're going to reward and punish with government grants and government interventions. The university, the academy, there's the highest empires of the academy, Harvard and Columbia University. I taught at Princeton. I don't know what's going to come down on them. So, this is, but it's absolutely demolishing the idea that the university is independent of the regime. Let's use the word regime. And to a great extent, it never was. Let's face that. The regime was always behind the scenes, exerting its influence on the academy, and the academy was always fundamentally not breaking from supporting the regime in some kind of general way. But this is a much more explicit and much more bold and obvious and blatant move that we are going, look, I mean, this is just unbelievable. We are going to punish you if you allow certain people to teach there, if you allow certain subjects to be taught, if you allow certain kind of protests to take place. And Columbia, which a year and a half ago, I mean, before this, they advertised themselves in their brochures to incoming students and to prospective students. Oh, we were the hotbed of protest in the 60s. And yeah, we made a mistake by calling in the cops at that point. But, we're proud of now the fact that we were the locus of protest against the Vietnam War and against racism. And then almost they turned right around on that. And this nonsense, they've given millions of dollars to supposedly Jewish students and professors, millions of dollars in this settlement, who were supposedly hurt. Their feelings were hurt by anti-Zionist and anti-genocide protests on the campus. This is just disgraceful. It's nonsense. So from my point of view, as an ex-member of the highest academies of the empire, again, these are things that were always, I never thought that they were actually totally independent of the regimes and of the dominant ideology. They were there to support, I forget exactly what the logo, the slogan of Princeton is something like "in the service of God and country." So they were there to support the regimes ultimately and the dominant ideology. But it was especially in the United States, there was an enormous amount of leeway. You did have real academic freedom. You did have a real element of that. You were able to say, Chomsky's and myself and leftists were able to say what they wanted. So this is a tightening of the screws on academia, and all across the Western world, the idea of free speech and unfettered, leaving the government and the regime the governing regime leaving academic institutions or any kind of media institutions, speech institutions, leaving them alone to do what they want and to say what they want, leaving people alone to do. The idea of that has gone. It's over with the Digital Services Act and in England, in Europe, and the equivalent in England now, where everybody's a terrorist and you prescribe 90-year-old people are getting dragged off the street for having a sign saying I oppose genocide. And now in the United States, they want to do that. And that's what they're doing. You know, they're going to give millions of dollars to supposedly hurt Jewish students and faculty at Columbia. And meanwhile, the woman who wrote an op-ed in the paper is getting thrown out of the country for what she wrote. And that's what they said. They're doing it because of what she wrote. Mm-hmm. And so this is, as you say, it's not just about this issue. This is the vanguard. It's the point of the sphere. This issue about anti-Semitism and which is really anti-Zionism, any kind of anti-Zionist or anti-Israeli notions, and the conflating and these guys who want to pass this law, making the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism, the law, and creating these categories of hate speech. There's all nonsense. But this is, look, they've given up because they no longer need it. And it's one thing, everybody has to realize that. That was the line of the Western world against the so-called communist world. Oh, we have freedom of speech. Guess what? The communist world went away. Suddenly they don't need that anymore. Suddenly, we're not really concerned about that anymore. That was never a principal thing. It was only a tool to use against the so-called enemy. Now you see, they're just doing away with it. And it's a horror show. It's something that we should be ashamed of. I mean, people in the academy, teachers and faculty in the academy now should be in an uproar about this. There should be general strike of the faculty. I mean, otherwise, what are you doing?
And Robert Brown, thank you very much for that $10 super sticker. A member of the Connecting the Dots Club. Thank you very much for that. I think it's also important for people to understand, Jim, that Columbia is a private institution. Harvard is a private institution. George Mason University is a private institution. The University of Virginia is a private institution. So you have now the federal government attacking private institutions for engaging in free speech.
Yeah, well, look, from my analysis as a Marxist, and there's a category that's used in Althusserian Marxism. These were I always understood these as ideological apparatuses of the state. Right. Ultimately, they are apparatuses that do serve, in the most general sense, the regime, the state. Okay, but a strong state, a smart state, leaves a lot of leeway. That's how you do it. Okay, you embrace opposition and control it in a certain way. And you can do that if you're economically strong, if you're culturally strong, if you have the general support of a large majority of the population. You can have ideological contestation, free speech. The problem is that we're becoming so weak economically, and you can't support people's lives anymore. You don't have the same general level of, my life is going to get better in this country just by doing the right thing, by having a decent job, by taking care of my family, by, following the rules in basic way. That's no longer the case. Nobody can afford an apartment. Kids who are graduating from college can't afford an apartment. I went to graduate school. I drove a cab in New York City for a summer and had enough money from that to go to California, San Diego, and rent an apartment, buy an old car, I went through graduate school, PhD, had one loan, which I used to buy a new car. And that was it. So you can't do that anymore. You can't go to University of California was practically free. CUNY was practically free. These things now cost tens of thousands of dollars to the public education, the public schools, and multi-tens of thousands of dollars to go to a private university. But in a general theoretical construct, these private universities were always, and certainly materially, they were part of the state apparatus. As you see, they depended on the money of the state. And
to your point, I'm from California.
Yeah.
And I was accepted when I applied to go to law school. I was accepted at UCLA.
Yeah.
I was accepted at Bolt in Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I went to University of California, Davis. I don't think my parents paid more than $2,000 for the year for me to go to law school.
Yeah.
And again, Bolt, that's a
good school.
That's no second-rate school.
Yeah.
And UCLA wasn't too bad either.
I know.
Because they were all in the UC system. It didn't matter which one I went to. It was going to cost me, as a California resident, it was going to cost me the same. You can't do that. In fact, now what they're doing is they're sending kids to the community colleges for your first 2 years.
Yeah.
And then they're asking you to defer your enrollment, go to the community college, get the basics out of the way, and then go into the UC system or the Cal State system, whichever one you want to go to, to finish your degree. That's a dramatic change.
The dramatic change. My wife, when she came to New York from Western PA 30 years ago, she was able to get an apartment, get a share, get a job, pay a decent wage, live a fun life as a young woman in New York without any support from her family. She had no money. They had no family money. Nobody was co-signing a rental agreement for her with, tens of, right now, $3,500 a month for one. I mean, that's cheap for a one-bedroom apartment in New York. You can't do it. People who have good jobs, who are making six figures, cannot live as single or even young couple adults in a decent way in a city in the United States. And so the entire system has changed in a way. That's why, they can come in. Harvard is desperate for that money. Mm-hmm. Columbia is desperate for that money. And the students and the faculty and administration of Columbia, well, the administration certainly is sold out. And I'm telling you, unless that faculty revolts on this, but what are they going to do? I mean, the science faculty needs that money.
Right.
They need those grants. Okay. The humanities faculty probably has no damn power at all because maybe the sociology, psychology department gets grants, but they need the grants. So you cannot escape this. And it's part of a larger theoretical understanding that we have to come to grips with in general. That is, this idea of the private versus the public is very hard to maintain a kind of clear and absolute distinction about. Okay. And that going forward, we have to think about that very seriously. But, as I say, from my Marxist analysis, these were always ideological apparatuses of the state. And now their ideological mission is going to fail because they're no longer supporting this, because what they're doing is they're demonstrating, instead of being demonstrations of how good the state is ideologically, instead of being an ideological support of the state. Oh, look, you can come here. People all over the world come. They want to come here. This is something that everybody recognizes as a field of intellectual inquiry that's unobstructed and unimpeded. Now they're showing you, no. First of all, you come here, we're going to throw you out if you say something that we don't like, right? You can't come here. So internationally, it's over. And if for American kids, it's like, well, I'm coming to this university, which I want to come to because I want to learn new things. And I want to be challenged. No, you can't be challenged. And even when you get out of the university, you're not going to have a job anyway. So,
and you're going to be in debt.
Yeah.
because I want to move to this final point, but to wrap this part of the conversation up, chances are you're going to be in debt, and the administration has dramatically curtailed access to federal funding for student loans so that they can increase the market for the private sector to get into the education lending business, which will wind up costing students exponentially more money.
Absolutely. But this goes to something I want to talk about maybe some other time, but what you're saying points to something very important. Government spend, there are two places you get American dollars. There's from the federal government spending. The spending of the federal government creates dollars which go into the economy as essentially no interest loans. And the taxes that are taken back are only a small portion of that. It would be nuts to take everything back. The deficit is the money that's left in your pocket and in everybody's pocket in the economy, and there's no interest on it, and they're never going to take it back because the federal government, as the creator of money, doesn't need that money. It creates money. The alternative is that you go to a private bank and borrow money at interest that you have to pay back. That's why the banksters and the ruling class wants to cut federal spending, because the alternative to federal spending is the private debt, you going into more and more private debt. So people have to start understanding this very clearly. The federal government deficit and debt is not a problem for you. It's not a problem in itself for anybody. The federal government doesn't have to collect enough. It doesn't use tax money to pay for it. It doesn't. It creates money. It doesn't need to collect all the money it spends every year. It would be nuts to do that. There'd be no money in the economy. The only place then you could get money is by going to the banks, and then you got money that you have to pay back with interest. And the interest is nuts. 25%, 20%. This is usury. When I was a kid, that was against the law. No reason. The government should cap the interest. There should be a law against charging anything more than private banks, even anything more than 3 or 4% above the federal interest rate. There should be a law against that. There's no reason there can't be. But the reason so all of this Doge stuff, and we're going to go out and we're going to cut the deficit, we're going to cut that means they're going to force you to go to banks to get the money that you need. That's what it means. First of all, they're going to cut the jobs, which don't exist anymore. And then you're going to have to go begging for jobs that don't pay as much and don't have any benefits, because of course, we can't have benefits. So it's very important to understand that difference, that when they cut federal spending, they're cutting money that's in the economy that you can get and you don't have to pay interest on. And then if they cut federal spending, what they're doing is increasing your need to go to private banks and borrow money at interest. So
tie that to Steve Bannon telling us in 2017 that the purpose of the Trump administration would be the deconstruction of the administrative state.
Yep.
And you also then tie that back into the educational conversation, where there are those such as Bannon and such as Trump that talk about these institutions of higher education are you hear them saying this all the time, are tools of the left. You've got Liz Cheney. Is it Liz Cheney? Lynn Cheney, Dick Cheney's wife. When Bush and the Cheney administration were in office, she was running around doing or trying to do to institutions of higher learning in terms of getting professors fired, what they're accusing professors of doing now. This whole conversation of deconstructing the administrative state, and educational institutions are just preaching and promoting leftist propaganda.
Well, look, this goes back to the Powell memo. And, I'll
Lewis
throw
Powell.
that out, the Lewis Powell memo, which was back in the 70s, I guess. And really it was, and this has been the Republican and the kind of libertarian Republican project since then, which is to put the federal government in the bath and smother it and kill the federal government. But people have to understand what's going on. This is a war against society. And this is what Margaret Thatcher said. There's no such thing as public money. There's only taxpayer money. Baloney. There is no such thing as taxpayer money on the federal level, Mm-hmm. On the state and that's why they want to throw everything back to the states and the cities, because there you do need to create money. States and cities do not create money. They must collect taxes. The federal government creates money. It doesn't need the taxes for anything. The purpose of taxes is to control inequality and inflation. The reason for 94% tax rates, which was the tax rate in 1946 or 45 on incomes over 200,000, which would now be like $3.5 million, that every dollar over that, you had to pay 94% in taxes, was not because they needed money for the federal government for programs. It's because they wanted to control inflation. And in the 40s, they knew they had to, there was a strong communist socialist movement around the world. They knew they had to control inequality, not inflation and inequality. They knew they had to control inequality. Anyway, but the point is, so it is extremely important to understand this. They want to do away with the idea of the social. They want the government to, they want you to think the government is dependent on collecting money from rich people. And the rich people are kind of the donors of society, and it's stealing from them somehow taxes. This is nonsense. And what they don't want you to understand is that we as the people actually can't do and can control the money system. Money is created by a political decision of Congress to appropriate money, and that money is created. And you can watch Alan Greenspan and Bernanke tell, no, we just hit the keyboard. That's how money is created. There's nothing wrong with that. They want to make you think there's something wrong. You go back to the gold standard. No, you shouldn't. The point is, what we have to do is control, is we have to, as a society, we actually have to take control of that from the ruling class, which now controls it by buying the Congress and controlling the political system. We have to have a real democracy, and we have to say, we control the money. We don't need to take any money from rich people to pay for anything. We can pay for anything we want. Really, we can. That's a power that we have. But they don't want you to see that. What they want you to do is we got to do away with the idea of government programs, because government programs are somehow, stealing money from people who really are hardworking people and giving it to the loafers and this is nonsense. We, the people, have the ability right now to control the money supply and to know what we want to know. We want to know, where's the money go? Where does it end up? And that's what we have to do. It's not about how do we collect the money. We don't have to collect any money.
And one of the tools that they're using to accomplish this now is eliminating you made this point earlier about sending people to the banks, eliminating the social safety net programs, allowing the private sector to come in and fill these voids, and they're shifting the money from the public side over to the private side. And again, this school loan issue is a perfect example of that. The government will limit the amount or the level of Pell Grants, for example, that it will provide. And then the delta that has to be made up, now you got to go to the private sector.
Yep.
At exorbitant interest rates. Final point for you. And it's what we started off with. And that is the US empire is on decline or in decline. And it really seems to be incompetence, incoherence, and self-destructive policies. The United States started this war in Ukraine, using Ukraine as a proxy. The United States is trying to start a war with China over Taiwan. The United States is allowing the genocide to occur in Gaza and is trying to start a war with Iran. Those are just 4 examples off the top of my head. And so a lot of what we are experiencing now is other countries reacting to the pressure that the United States is trying to impose upon them. And they're saying, we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to unite in resistance. We will trade amongst ourselves. We will trade using our own currencies. You can sanction me till the cows come home. But China's going to buy that Russian oil.
Yeah. That's right.
Your
India's
thoughts?
gonna, and these tariffs these sanctions that Trump's saying he's gonna put on Russia, those are secondary sanctions on other countries. We're gonna put tariffs on India if they sell. You know what? They're gonna buy the oil. They're gonna buy China and India are gonna buy the oil, and they're gonna buy it under
is
cover.
Afraid of Donald Trump.
Nobody. He's always been a weak guy. He's always been a weak character who's been pushed around by the factions in the United States who have real strong programs like the Heritage Foundation and the Republican faction and the neocons, and they're not scared. We're going to give more. We're going to give more weapons to Ukraine, and we're going to sanction Russia anymore. Russia's going, you did all the sanctions. What are you going to do to us? And Russia didn't know in 2022 the extent to which they would be hurt by the sanctions. They found out. Oh, we can deal with this. We do, as you say, the BRICS are here. We have trading relationships with China and with India. We can deal with this. We've dealt with it. What else are you going to do? You've already thrown your best punches. We're going to send weapons. What weapons? Watch Brian Berletic on the New Atlas. They don't have these weapons. Oh, I'm going to send. They're giving them a promise to send weapons that haven't been produced yet. Okay, they're going to go to war with.
Look, Trump told Putin, "You got 50 days."
Yeah.
What did Putin do? Oh, I'm going to send some more missiles into Kiev.
Yeah.
Oh,
and Trump is like, how dare he? How dare he?
Now you got 10 days.
Yeah. Okay. What is he going to do?
Call me in 11 days, and let's see where we are.
But again, the Americans have, like the Israelis did, the Americans proved to the world that the problem that for them, they've screwed themselves over on this. They proved they're still partying, as I always like to say, like it's 1999 when they were the kind of hyperpower, and 2000, 2005, 2010. Look at the world now. 2000, 2010. Look at a map of the largest trading partners of every country in the world was the United States. Look at it now. China. And what are you going to do? You can't sanction the whole world. You're sanctioning yourself. You're just isolating yourself.
But wait a minute, Jim. Wait a minute, Jim. How did China become that power? The United States exported.
Yep.
You can't grow your economy without manufacturing things. Exactly. You cannot. When we look at the numbers or the reports, the jobs reports and the financial the economic reports about the United States and how the economy is thriving, that's the financialized side of the economy. That's Wells Fargo. That's Bank America. That's Citibank. That's not trickling down to, that's Wall Street, not Main Street. China grew its economy by taking the manufacturing jobs that the United States wanted to export. And what is China doing now? Those piecemeal type assembly jobs that they based their economy on, China is what? Exporting that work to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Because their economy has developed to the point where they don't need that work anymore.
They're doing high value added work. They're replacing everything in the United States. Oh, we're not going to sell you airplane parts anymore. Okay, we'll figure chips, high level semiconductors. Guess what? China's making them now. You know, we won't let you buy American chips. Oh, I guess we'll have to make them ourselves because they know how to do it. But that's also because there was 40 years of state-directed, capital-intensive. They built an infrastructure. If they wanted to have a chip industry, they set up a chip industry in I forget Zheng's, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but the state directed. They were private enterprises, but the state coordinated and directed and set up the infrastructure for it because the state has the money, as much money as it needs. And if they want to have bullet trains, we're going to have bullet trains. If they want to have a high-tech industry, we're going to set it up for you. We're going to set up the conditions for it. And also, they have all the raw materials. And between them and Russia, they literally have all the raw materials that are necessary in the world. So what's the United States going to do to them? Why does any American want to be an enemy of China? Why does any American want to go to war? The Americans is going to Australia and South Korea. We're going to go to war. You have to pledge to us that you will go to war over Taiwan. And they're doing it stupidly. What are you talking about? The Chinese want to take over Taiwan, they're going to take over Taiwan. You're not going to stop them 7,000 miles away. Australia and South Korea aren't going to stop them. The Chinese,
especially with the hypersonic missiles. In order to deal with China, you got to send aircraft carriers into the South China Sea. All you're doing is sending them targets.
Yep. I know. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's none of your business. Everybody in the world, including the United States government, recognizes Taiwan as part of China. It's like China saying, we're going to go to war over Texas. Why would the Chinese people want to go to war with America over the status of Texas? The American people don't want to go to war over Taiwan. They want to be able to pay the damn rent and buy food without credit cards and go to school and bring their children to the doctor. That's what they want to do. But Taiwan is nothing with the status of China's relation to Taiwan has nothing to do with them. But we got to go to war over that. That's what we got to be prepared for. And that's what they tried to do with Russia. They tried to instigate, to build, and they did. They built the best army in Europe, in Ukraine, a NATO army. They built it. They set it up as a spearhead against Russia, and Russia said, we're not going to let you do that. And they didn't. And now there's nothing they can do about that. They're defeated there, and they're not going to win. So what are they going to do? They can bluff, and Trump can bluff and bluster about Russia and Ukraine or China and Taiwan. There's nothing they can do about it, except if they want to blow up the world with nuclear weapons, they can do that. But that's not going to help anybody in the United States either. So American people have to realize this level of insanity and stupidity. It really is. It's stubborn incompetence and inability to understand what the world is actually like now. You cannot defeat Russia in Ukraine. You cannot defeat China in the Western Pacific. These countries are strong economically and militarily in a way. You're not going to push them back down. You can't. It's no longer a question of whether they're going to catch up with us. It's a question of, as you say, can we reestablish some kind of manufacturing economy so that we could actually build the infrastructure, let alone the weapons that we want, but the infrastructure and the goods and services that people need in the economy? We're the ones who are underdeveloped now. So we got better start realizing that you're in no position to be threatening anybody, and nobody is intimidated by you.
Final point. When you look at the education of our adversaries, when you look at Xi Jinping, for example, he got his undergrad degree in chemical engineering. He has a law degree, and he also was a part-time student at the Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences. His dissertation was on what? China's rural marketization. Mm-hmm. So you wonder how, under the Xi administration, there has been this dramatic turnaround, bringing all these people, all these rural people, out of abject poverty and developing a middle class. Xi Jinping studied that, wrote a PhD dissertation on that. People don't know that Vladimir Putin not only has a law degree, has a PhD in economics. So when Joe Biden says, I'm going to turn the ruble into rubble, that's part of what Putin did his dissertation on. The nationalization of industries in Russia. And so Putin said, oh, hey, man, let me dust off my dissertation. Let me turn to page 322, and I got a solution to your problem. Man, not only are we outgunned militarily, we've been outthought.
Outthought. This is a very important point. And this is, you don't have a democracy unless you have an educated populace, a well-educated, thoughtful populace. And, as you say, the intellectual fault of, these people, they study history. They study economics. They study history. And they study the history of thought and of ideas. And they know something about it. I've been very fortunate to be able to have that kind of education in the United States. And I know that I could have gone without it. And I know that most people in the United States don't get it. And it's very hard to get. Okay. And so that's a problem that we have in this country we have to deal with. But what you see is our leaders, they're running off World War II movies. That's really their political education. Donald Trump is living in a World War II movie. He thinks that's the world the United States is living in. It's not even
wait a minute. But he's living in a bad World War II movie because what most people don't realize is the United States didn't win World War II.
I know.
The Soviet Union won World War II.
He's living in the American World War II movies. D-Day. Oh, we're the greatest power in the world. We're always going to win. And it's inevitable.
Jim, am I right? Folks, look it up. The Allies would not have won World War II if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of the Soviet Union. And that's something that Putin clearly understands because he lost a huge part of his family during that time.
Brother. He talks about it. There were 27 million Soviets who were killed in World War II. 30 million Chinese were killed, and you don't realize that. The Japanese did to China. And the World War II was won on the battlefields of the Soviet Union.
Correct.
Turning point it was the Battle of Kursk, in fact. And the Germans knew they had lost. They knew it was over by then. And they knew they were fighting a losing battle. By the time the Americans came in and the British on the Western Front, they knew they were going to lose. They knew it was over.
So
watch Vladimir Putin say, it's a great thing in 2017, or he was at a conference, and he's talking to American Western reporters, and he's saying, you are not listening to me. I'm trying to tell you that the things are getting dangerous. And if you keep pushing us, and he said, I know what it's like. I lost my mother in a battle of Leningrad, one of the worst sieges in the world. People were cannibal. That went on for almost 2 years. Thousands of people died. Starvation. And his brother was dying. And he said, one of the things I learned from that is if they're coming after you, you got to hit first. And this is Putin begging the Western press to report what he's saying and to report what we're doing. This was before they had finished their hypersonic missiles. We are going to have to build these weapons, and we're going to have to defend ourselves, and we will, because we're not going through that again. And this is the other thing about the American World War II movie conscious ideology is the United States of America has never been hit hard since the War of 1812. They lost six figures of soldiers in World War II, but they didn't lose them at home. The home front wasn't hit. Cities weren't blown up. Starvation, there weren't cities under siege in the United States of America. The Pearl Harbor and 9/11, a few thousand people were killed. In the next war, you are not going to be escaping this. They're not going to leave you alone while they fight the war over there.
You will not be comfortable.
Get hurt, American cities are going to get hurt. Chinese cities get hurt, American cities are going to get hurt. And the United States population is not prepared for that at all.
I'm gonna draw a parallel, and I hope it makes sense. The tennis great Novak Djokovic is from Serbia.
Yep.
And one of I was listening to an interview that Djokovic did, and they asked him, where do you draw your strength from? How are you able to be so mentally tough in the midst of a tennis match? And he looked at the camera and he said, I was born in Serbia during the war. I know how to suffer. And when he said that, I sat back because I understood the history he was drawing upon. And Vladimir Putin is saying, as Russians, they know how to suffer. Xi Jinping is saying, in China, we understand sacrifice. We understand the power of the collective.
That's right.
We understand sacrificing for the good of the nation. Americans have no clue.
No clue.
No clue. We rally around an ideology that is really based upon mythology. Those folks suffer.
The entire society is suffering.
They aren't joking.
Every family knows people, their grandparents were killed in World War II. Every family has someone in China who was living under colonialism and the Japanese. And these were horrible situations. And every family knows that. And they know it in their gut, and they know it materially, and they've smelled it and they've lived it. The United States, wars are something that happened over there. Even, Vietnam, I have friends, I have relatives killed in Vietnam, but it was over there. It's on the news. It's something you see on the news at night, but it's not something that you've heard and felt and smelt here. And that's what people don't understand. It's not going to happen that way again. You're not going to get in a war with Russia or China where you're going to be left sitting in the snug watching it on television.
Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, as always, thank you. What's your latest piece, and folks can go to Substack to find it?
I guess it's the latest one is We Cannot Bite Israel, but I'm trying to write something about AI now. There's I've just been involved in a lot of personal stuff, so my mind is a little bit captured, but it'll be coming on Substack, and I do some videos too. I have videos about it, so please go to my Substack. You'll find everything.
Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, again, man, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Always good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And folks, look, thank you all for joining me today. Thank you for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me. And trust me, we see you and we hear everything. We're here every day. We're watching, listening, we're nodding, we're thinking, connecting dots like a champ. But some of you